Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Jessica Ripley, the Community Response Coordinator at Avalon Center. Today, I'm going to recap some of the information we have shared throughout the month about stalking and how to distinguish stalking from kind gestures and harassment. At the end of this presentation, there will be a survey linked below. If you wouldn't mind taking a couple of minutes to fill that out, we would truly appreciate your feedback. So before we begin, this presentation will contain material that addresses sensitive topics. I acknowledge that this content may be difficult, and I encourage you to take care of yourself in the best way that you see fit.
So why take the time to learn about stalking? Well, stalking is a really important thing to understand. It is criminal, it is traumatic, and it is dangerous. Stalking is criminal. It is a crime across the United States. That means it's a crime at the federal level, in all 50 states, U.S. territories, tribal lands, and in our military justice system. It might be a misdemeanor or a felony, depending on the jurisdiction and the situation. A lot of people don't realize that stalking is a crime, and so many victims are left wondering, well, what, should I call the police because somebody rang my doorbell or drove by my house? And the answer is that victims can consider reporting to authorities as well as documenting the stalking. Stalking is traumatic. Many stalking victims experience mental health impacts, including depression, anxiety, insomnia, and social dysfunction. Quite a few also lose time from work, many lose their jobs altogether. And a significant number relocate. In fact, 1 in 7 stalking victims move as a result of their victimization. It's important to hear from stalking victims and survivors in their own words. This survivor said, "I have given up all hopes of ever having a safe life. For the rest of my life, I will be looking over my shoulder, expecting to see him there." And finally, stalking is dangerous. Stalking often co-occurs with physical violence, including physical assault, sexual violence, and rape. 1 in 5 stalkers use weapons to threaten or harm their victims. And in 76% of intimate partner femicides, that's murder of a female partner by a male partner, in 76% of completed and 85% of attempted, there was stalking the year prior to that murder or attempted murder. And yet so often, these early signs of danger are ignored as, oh, it's just texting, it's just ringing the doorbell. In fact, one researcher went so far as to say that stalking is homicide in slow motion. So what's the good news? The good news is that we have an opportunity, because stalking is one of the few crimes where early intervention can prevent trauma, violence, and even death. When we recognize those early signs, take them seriously, connect victims to resources, and hold offenders accountable, we can keep our communities safe from this prevalent and terrible crime. That's why it's so critical that you learn about stalking and how to know it, name it, and stop it.
All right, so now let's talk about the dynamics of stalking. Between 6 and 7.5 million people are stalked in a 1-year period. That averages more than 1 in 6 women and 1 in 17 men that will be stalked in their lifetime. And while women are more likely to experience stalking than men, the majority of victims report that the offender is male, regardless of the victim's sexual orientation. About 85% of victims know their perpetrator, and of those, the majority of stalkers are current or former intimate partners. As we heard earlier, stalking cases can be a major predictor of violence. We know this because over 1 in 5 stalking cases involve a direct attack on the victim, and over 1 in 5 stalkers use a weapon to threaten or harm their victims. And less than 40% of stalking victims report to law enforcement. This is due to how misunderstood stalking is. So what is stalking exactly? Stalking is engaging in a pattern of behavior directed at a specific person, that would cause a reasonable person to fear for his or her safety or the safety of others. The key word here is fear. This is what differentiates stalking from nice gestures and harassment. Always, 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 when fear becomes a part of the victim's response, we know we are dealing with a stalking case. So, stalking, according to Virginia law, is any person who, on more than one occasion, engages in conduct directed at another person with the intent to place or with the knowledge that the conduct places that other person in reasonable fear of death, criminal sexual assault, or bodily injury that to that other person or to that other person's family or household member. So, stalking can include a wide variety of behaviors. Most stalking behaviors fall under one of these categories. Surveillance, which includes watching, tracking, and/or gathering information. Life invasion means showing up in the victim's life where the victim does not want them to be. Interference includes sabotaging, attacking, humiliating, or otherwise changing the victim's life for the worst. Intimidation means the ways a stalker threatens and or scares a victim. These behaviors can happen through technology, in person, or both, and they oftentimes overlap and can build on each other. All right, context is key. A cup of coffee, a bouquet of flowers, a phone call asking, "How are you doing?" These all sound like kind gestures, right? But maybe they're not. Maybe there's more to that cup of coffee. Consider this story. A woman calls the police hysterical. All she'll say is, "There's a cup of coffee in my car." Understandably, the police don't understand what the big deal is and don't see the situation as urgent. Eventually, she says, "He's here." It turns out this was a stalking victim who had moved to escape her abusive ex-boyfriend, who was stalking her. She did not believe he knew where she was. When she left for work that morning, there was a cup of coffee in her car with his old nickname for her on it. She was terrified. So try asking, why did that cup of coffee scare you? And keep these three factors in mind. Something that is not frightening to you may be frightening to the victim. Stalking behaviors often have specific meanings that may only be understood between the offender and the victim. And stalking criminalizes otherwise non-criminal behavior. So while buying someone else a cup of coffee is not a crime, it is if it is part of a stalking course of conduct. First, I'm going to discuss some myths about stalking, and then I'll share the reality with you. The stalker is a secret admirer or a kind person who is misunderstood. Stalking is a form of love and affection. The stalker's actions are harmless. The stalker's interest should be flattered. In reality, the stalker is usually known to the victim and is most often a current or former intimate partner. Stalkers have different motivations, but often intend to scare their victims and or do not stop when the victim is scared. Stalking can escalate quickly and often co-occurs with or predicts serious violence. Many stalking victims report feeling extreme fear and emotional distress. So how can you support those experienced stalking? You can start by believing and validating victims. Don't question or minimize what they tell you. Focus on the offender's actions, not the victim's responses. Nothing the victim did justifies the stalker's behavior. Remind victims that this is not their fault. Support the victim and encourage them to seek help and to keep an incident log. Documentation is critical to show how stalking incidents are adding up. A stalking log is available for free on the Spark website. Respect the victim's privacy. Do not share any information about the victim and respect their wishes. Refer them to resources to make an individual safety plan. You can call Avalon's 24-hour helpline at 757-258-5051 and check in. Stalking cases can last a long time. Continue to check in on their preferred communication medium and be a source of support. That wraps up Stalking Awareness Month. Thank you so much for joining me today. Avalon's contact information is listed here. You can also find it on our website and social media pages. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. And as a friendly reminder, there is a link to a survey listed below.